Hello listeners, welcome back to Luke's English Podcast. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing fine and that you are glad to be listening to another episode of my podcast for learners of English all around the world. This episode, as usual, has a PDF. The PDF is basically all the notes that I've prepared for the episode, which I will be reading from during the episode. You can find the PDF. It's free for you to download. Just check the episode description. You'll see a link. That's how you get the PDF. You can read with me if you like, or you can maybe just check the PDF later, which would be a good idea. That's probably a good idea. If you want my advice for how to use the PDFs, listen to the episode first and then check out the PDF, read through it yourself, and you could identify words or phrases that perhaps you heard during the episode that you want to record, or at least check the spelling for and things like that. So the PDF is there for you if you want to get it. Link in the description. In fact, I'm going to start reading from the PDF right now. Here we go. Hello listeners. This episode is all about haiku in English. Just in case you don't know, haiku is a form of short poem which originated in Japan. During this episode, I'm going to read lots of haiku to you, in English of course. Each haiku packs in a lot of meaning, imagery, and feelings into just a few words. Each one is like a little story describing a moment in time. Each one is a kind of short meditation which encourages you to stop and think for a moment. And in fact, you could consider each one of these to be a quick test of your English, or at least an opportunity to learn some bits of vocabulary. As you listen to this episode, consider these questions. So first of all, do you understand what each haiku means as you hear me say them a couple of times? Basically, do you understand them? What do they make you think about and feel? And do you know all the vocabulary used in each one? As we go through these mini poems, I will explain their meaning and the words and phrases used, so there'll be lots of opportunities to pick up English from this. Also, I will talk about what they make me think about and feel, and I will generally discuss this interesting and inspiring form of poetry, which is all about the economical and evocative use of language. So I'll do a little bit of rambling in response to each one, more or less. To begin with, here are 4 haikus, just to give you a little taste of what to expect from the rest of the episode. There'll be a lot more during the episode. So first, a classic Japanese haiku translated into English. This is First Autumn Morning by Murakami Kijo. First Autumn Morning by Murakami Kijo, and it goes like this. First autumn morning, the mirror I stare into shows my father's face. First autumn morning, the mirror I stare into shows my father's face. I'll discuss that later. All right, I will come back to that and discuss it. Now, though, a couple of more contemporary ones written by American writer John Stevenson. The first one is this. Thin winter coat, so little protection against her boyfriend. Thin winter coat, so little protection against her boyfriend. So it's very short, only a few words that paint a simple picture, but there are many possible interpretations. What does that mean to you? What does that say to you? What kind of story is that telling? What image do you see when you hear these words? Thin winter coat, so little protection. Pause. Against her boyfriend. Many interpretations, and as I said, it tells a little story which expands as we imagine the context of this observation or moment of time that has been captured. Again, that one will come back later. That haiku will come back later, and I'll discuss it in more detail. And another one from John Stevenson. Seeing it her way, it must have been lonely living with me. Seeing it her way, it must have been lonely living with me. Plus, one more as a little taste at the beginning. This one for true lepsters. Here we go. A skeleton sits, headphones on, still listening. Intro not done yet. A skeleton sits, headphones on, still listening. Intro not done yet. And that last one is not up to the same standard as the others, but still, it's a bit of fun. And I do have a set of haiku for lepsters, which I will read near the end of the episode. All 4 of those will come up again during the episode, and I'll explain them in case you feel like you didn't really understand them. So what do those make you think about? I will talk about each one of them again and many, many more in this episode. So if you're ready, let's begin. So this all started with an email I got from a lepster called Helen, Helen Leclerc. Hello, Helen. Helen is how I would say that in English, but in French it's Hélène, I suppose. But anyway, Hélène or Helen sent me this email quite a long time ago, to be fair. Sorry for taking ages to do this, Helen. Helen listens to the podcast from Quebec in French-speaking Canada, which means that French is her first language. And just a note about French speakers in Canada. I just want to give a quick note about that. Of course, most Canadians have English as a first language, but as you may know, about 20% of people there have French as their first language, mostly those living in the province of Quebec, but also parts of New Brunswick and other areas in Canada. In my experience, even though French-speaking Canadians live in Canada, where a lot of their fellow citizens are native English speakers, people from Quebec don't always speak English at that level too. Some people do, and there are lots of bilingual people in Canada, of course, but it's perfectly normal for a lot of people in Quebec to spend their lives living in French and don't develop their English skills to the same level. So just a bit of context about French-speaking Canadians there. Not all Canadians are native English speakers. I do have listeners in French-speaking Canada, like Helen, for example. Bonjour. Everyone. Canadian French is something I'm not that familiar with. I know that in French-speaking Canada, there's a certain kind of slang, Quebecois, it's known as. I'll need to get Paul Taylor to come and talk to me about that. But anyway, let me try to stick to the point here. Helen wrote me a very nice email sharing a lot of information. It started like this. Dear Luke, how are you today? I'm fine, thanks, Helen. Dear Luke, how are you today? I hope you're doing well. I discovered your podcast on Google last June completely by chance. I'd just returned from my first trip to New York, and my goal was to stay in the New York spirit, the NYC spirit. I wanted to learn a bit more about this city that I fell in love with. I Googled something like New York stories in the search engine. One of the links that came up was your podcast, episode number 872, The Birthday Party. Remember that one, listeners? That was Learn English with a Short Story, The Birthday Party. Even though it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, it was, but I didn't know that yet. I started listening to it. I was really impressed by the clarity of your speech, not only your pronunciation, but also the way you explain things. Wow, I understood absolutely everything. You are a great teacher, Luke. Your passion makes your podcast compelling. I absolutely love your sense of humour. Thank you very much, Helen. That's nice of you to say that. She continues, I became completely addicted to your podcast, and several months ago, I became a premium listener. Well done, Helen. Good for you. I've already listened to a lot of episodes. Thank you so much for all the work you put into these episodes. You are welcome, of course, Helen. It's always nice to hear from listeners and their stories of how they've discovered my podcast and if it has helped them at all. And I'm always open to hearing people in different countries around the world tell me how wonderful I am. I'm always happy to hear that. But seriously, it's very encouraging for me to get emails from listeners. And I wonder if you, listener, hello, if you discovered this podcast in a similar way and if you have had a similar experience as Helen, who probably lives thousands of miles away from you in a completely different part of the world. So, I don't know, how did you discover the podcast? Did you just Google something and end up here? Did someone recommend it to you? How did you discover Luke's English podcast? Maybe the algorithm just sent it in your direction. Anyway, To cut a long story short, Helen explained in her email that she is really into haiku, both in French and in English. She writes haiku in French and more in English, and in fact her journey with English is closely connected to her love of haiku. Now we will come back to Helen a little bit later in this episode to continue her story, but this does bring us to the main topic of this episode, haiku, because one of the things Helen mentioned is the idea of haiku. She shared a few different haikus, specifically ones written by John Stevenson, the writer I mentioned earlier. She shared some with me and suggested that they could be a good topic for the podcast, and I completely agree. We'll come back to Helen in a moment. Let's talk about haiku, though. What is haiku? Do you have haiku in your language? I mean, it's a Japanese thing, of course. We have a haiku in English. Most English-speaking people will be aware of what haiku is, basically. Do you have it? Is it a well-known thing in your language? Do people write haiku in your language as well? Here is some information from wikipedia.com about haiku. So haiku is a type of short-form poetry that originated in Japan. Haiku originated as an opening part of a larger Japanese genre of poetry called renga, and over time they began to be written as standalone poems. So that just means that, normally in the old days, originally haiku were not poems on their own. They were just the beginning part of a much longer poem, and then they started to be written on their own. Haiku was given its current name by the Japanese writer Masaoka Shiki at the end of the 19th century. So I think haiku has travelled around the world and is known everywhere now, and is probably written in different languages. You can let me know. Do you have haiku in your language? And have you ever read any, or indeed written any haiku? Now, is it haiku or haikus? Plural or singular? What's going on there? So, by the way, haiku is the name of the art form. So we can say, I love haiku, I write haiku, what is haiku? Those are all correct sentences when referring to the art form. This is equivalent to saying, I love poetry or I love comedy, right? So haiku is the name of the art form. But what is the plural form? One poem, two poems. One haiku, two haiku, or one haiku, two haikus? What's the plural form? Actually, both are correct, with the two forms having slightly different connotations. So the first one is haiku without an S. So one haiku, two haiku. That's the traditional way. In Japanese, nouns don't typically change form to indicate plurality. Therefore, the word haiku functions as both the singular and the plural, and this is the preferred form among poets, scholars, and traditionalists, right? So, for example, Matsuo Basho wrote many beautiful haiku, is something you might hear being said in the sort of traditional poetic community, right? But then you've got haikus with a plural S, that's this sort of anglicised way. As the word has been integrated into the English language, it has adopted standard English pluralization, which basically means adding an S to it. This version is widely accepted in casual conversation and is listed as a valid plural in most modern dictionaries, including Merriam-Webster and Oxford. For example, the students wrote 3 haikus for their homework assignment. So you will hear both being used. I think during the episode, most of the time I'm saying haikus because, I'm just using the kind of standard casual conversational way of putting it. Okay. What about the structure of haiku? What is a haiku? What defines a haiku? Now, it is quite specific, a bit like the way that an English sonnet is quite specific. It has a certain number of syllables, certain rhyming system. Again, from Wikipedia, traditional Japanese haiku consist of 3 phrases composed of 17 mori, which are called on in Japanese. These mori are basically like syllables in English, right? So 3 phrases with 17 syllables. Let's just keep it simple and say syllables in a 5-7-5 pattern. So you got 5 syllables in the first phrase, 7 syllables in the second phrase, and 5 syllables again in the third phrase. Also, in the traditional Japanese form, there is a kireji, or cutting word, and a kigo, which is basically a seasonal reference, right? So basically, a type of poem with 3 lines, 17 syllables in English versions in the whole poem, in a 5-7-5 pattern, so 5 syllables in the first phrase, 7 in the middle phrase, and 5 in the final phrase, a cutting word in there somewhere. This is basically a word that somehow breaks or interrupts something else in the poem, or the idea of one thing being interrupted by something else. So obviously when we translate Japanese haiku into English, or even translate the whole concept, a poetic concept from Japanese into English, some things are going to be lost in translation. And this idea of the cutting word is probably something that doesn't perfectly translate, but it's basically the idea of a word that breaks or interrupts something else in the poem. But there is that sense of something being interrupted and then maybe continuing, or an interruption which creates a certain effect. And also a seasonal reference, especially in traditional Japanese haiku, there's a seasonal reference, something that describes or refers to nature and particularly the changing of seasons. But these rules or elements are often broken. Right, they're often broken. Haiku by classical Japanese poets such as Matsuo Basho also deviate from the 17-syllable pattern and sometimes don't contain a kireji, a cutting word. So the form is a bit flexible, basically. Originally from Japan, haiku today are written by authors worldwide. Haiku in English and haiku in other languages have different styles and traditions, while still incorporating aspects of the traditional haiku form. And we're going to see examples of that from the haiku I'm going to be reading from. Non-Japanese language haiku vary widely on how closely they follow traditional elements, the traditional sort of rules, so to speak. Additionally, a minority movement within modern Japanese haiku, supported by Ogiwara Seisensui and his disciples, so this sort of modern Japanese movement has varied from the tradition of 17 syllables kind of, as well as taking nature as their subject. So basically, non-Japanese haiku often break the rules, but there are also Japanese haiku authors these days who have also broken from tradition and write haikus with more or less than 17 syllables and about all kinds of things, not just on topics relating to nature. In Japanese, haiku are traditionally printed as a single line, while haiku in English often appear as 3 lines, although variations exist. There's a lot of minimalism in haiku and a lot of discipline involved in the writing of haiku, a bit like 100-word stories, which I have talked about before on this podcast. The strict limitations of this form require a lot of discipline from the writer, but sometimes strict limitations somehow open the door to creativity. When you have only a few elements to work with, it can force you to be very economical with words, getting straight to the point, and the results can be quite powerful. Also, there's a kind of Zen-like sense of meditation about haiku, a way to capture both a sense of calm and a moment of realization or change, and the connection between changes in the natural world and similar changes in our own personal inner world. Please forgive the long, rambling introduction, but I am just setting up the context, which is going to help us to then explore some little poems in the rest of the episode. Now, I think my description of haiku probably doesn't really do justice to this art form, but I guess that's okay. If you know more about haiku, then please feel free to add your comments if you have any. Japanese listeners perhaps might be well placed to bring any light to this subject, so I welcome your insightful comments on the whole subject of haiku. Now then, let me just read some more. Here is a selection of haiku that everyone should know about. At this point, I should start reading out some examples of haiku in English, and I'll explain what they mean and what they mean to me and some of the vocab. There'll be a lot of haiku throughout the episode. I'll give them numbers, and you'll find them written on the episode PDF, link in the description. If you want to comment on them, right, if you want to comment on any particular haikus, you can give the number as a reference so we know which one you're talking about. Some of these haiku might not grab you, right? Some of these might not mean anything to you, but others will, right? So let us know which ones you like and why you like them. I want to encourage you to write your thoughts in English in the comments section. You don't have to write your comments in the form of haiku, but, please feel free to take that challenge and write your own haiku, right? But just respond to, any of the haiku that really sort of resonate with you at all. As we go through the episode, I think the haiku will get more and more interesting, from quite profound and poetic ones to funny ones, and then some which will definitely make sense to you if you are a true Lepster. So here we go with my first set. Here are some examples of traditional Japanese haiku translated into English, some Japanese haiku that break from the traditional rules, and also some English language ones which also break away from the traditional structure. So I found these ones with their explanations on a website called reedsy.com. That's reedsy.com, in a blog post called 40 Haiku Poem Examples Everyone Should Know About. Couldn't find the name of the author, but reedsy.com, 40 Haiku Poem Examples Everyone Should Know About. I picked some. I haven't picked all 40, I just picked a few. So the first one is called The Old Pond by Matsuo Basho. Is this the most famous haiku ever? It might be. And in English, it goes like this. An ancient pool. A frog jumps in. The sound of water. Right. Obviously, something is lost in translation here, I think. But it's an ancient pool, like a pool of water, right? An ancient pool. A frog jumps in. The sound of water. I think something is definitely lost in translation here. Probably in Japanese, this works better. The English version appears not to have a cutting word and doesn't follow the 17-syllable rule, but that probably doesn't matter. I'm sure it's nearly impossible to translate this from the original Japanese, and any translation will take something away from the original version. If you've ever done any translating or interpreting work, hello to any translators or interpreters listening to this. If you've ever done any of that kind of work, you will know that you often have to make various choices as you try to find the best and closest equivalent in the target language. Whoever translated this one obviously had to work hard to capture the spirit of the original. I have seen other translations of this haiku that take a slightly different approach, like this one translated by Harry Ben, which goes like this. An old silent pond. A frog jumps into the pond. Splash. Silence again. So that manages to use 17 syllables. An old silent pond, that's 5 syllables. A frog jumps into the pond, that's 7 syllables. Splash. Silence again, that's 5 syllables. So that manages to use 17 syllables, and there's a cutting word, splash. But the word pond is repeated, isn't it? Which isn't great. It seems that we don't generally, us humans don't like to have words repeated. There's also this version too, which is a bit more simple. An ancient pond. A frog jumps in. Splash. Anyway, let's not get too hung up on the rules of haiku, especially in English. With all due respect to the great haiku masters, rules are made to be broken, aren't they? But anyway, what do you think about this particular one? An old ancient pond, a frog jumps in, splash. I mean, again, I'm sure that the original Japanese version is more obviously great, but it does tell you something about the origins of haiku, which is that it's images of nature. And there's something about the surface of the water. It creates a certain image, a certain atmosphere. This old ancient pond, and you think of the surface of the water, and then a frog jumps in. So from stillness, the stillness of the surface of the pond, and then the moment of action where the frog leaps in, and you have the surface of the water being disturbed as there is a splash. And the frog disappears into the water, and then eventually calmness and stillness and peace returns. There's something Zen-like about that. Here are some comments about this haiku from the blog post on readsy.com. One of the 4 great masters of Japanese haiku, Matsuo Basho, is known for his simplistic yet thought-provoking haikus. The Old Pond, arguably his most famous piece, stays true to his style of couching observations of human nature within natural imagery. Couching, meaning putting something inside something else, couching it like a person sitting on a couch, right? So placing or encapsulating, incorporating, couching. It's a nice word, couching. Putting something so it sits comfortably inside something else. In this case, the writer couches observations of human nature within natural imagery. What is the human nature? What is the observation of human nature in a frog jumping into a pond? Not sure. One interpretation is that by metaphorically using the pond to symbolize the mind, Basho brings to light the impact of external stimuli, embodied by the frog, a traditional subject of Japanese poetry, on the human mind. So basically, a frog jumping into a lake as a metaphor for the nature of human consciousness and the human condition. Right, it's very Zen, isn't it? The stillness of the water, the interruption of the frog, and then the stillness again. In the meditative state, the water is your mind, the frog is an interruption, and then your mind naturally reverts to its calm state again. So that is a meditative image. Anyway, let's move on to number 2, which is A Poppy Blooms by Katsushika Hokusai. And it goes like this. This is number 2. I write, erase, rewrite, erase again, and then a poppy blooms. I write, erase, rewrite, erase again, and then a poppy blooms. Right, so this is obviously about the writer writing poetry. And I suppose anyone who's ever tried to do a piece of writing, even if it's just like a piece of academic writing for your IELTS test or something that you have to work on very hard, that has to be right, has to be just right. Even writing an email, you write, you erase, you rewrite, you erase again, and then you keep going. Sometimes it's a struggle, but then sometimes there's that moment when inspiration strikes, and that is a wonderful feeling. You struggle to write, you struggle to get it right, you correct yourself, and then poof, there's a moment of inspiration. That's what this is about. In this piece, Katsushika Hokusai draws similarities between life and his writing, both processes of repetitive creation and destruction, writing, erasing, writing again. Neither are linear or smooth, and both demand constant work and perseverance. However, the reward of his perseverance is something undeniably beautiful, which is, I think, true in life. We try, we fail, we try again. We keep going, we persevere, and then something beautiful happens as a result. You know, I'm always interested in comparing things to learning English, but I think there is a lesson to be learned here there's a lesson to be learned about learning English from this, which is that obviously you've got to try and try and try again. Try, fail, try again, just do your best. And then eventually, in the midst of this process, something beautiful does happen. And it might happen slowly. In this case, it's a poppy blooming. A poppy is a kind of flower, a wild flower, beautiful flower, red petals. And to bloom is when the flower comes out, right? When the flower opens up and comes out and it reveals itself, which is quite a slow process. So that's just something to reflect on. Perseverance, trial and error, making mistakes and trying again is this. Oh, that is my timer. Beautiful music. That process is a cycle that you have to go through, and it's in the midst of that process that perhaps, without even realizing it or seeing it directly, something beautiful emerges as a result. In the case of learning English, it is your dogged perseverance which pays off in a kind of slow but steady improvement, or maybe a moment of maybe there is one particular moment and you feel it. It's a palpable moment where you realise, I feel like something good has happened. I have actually unlocked some skills here or abilities. I'm going to drink some water. Cheers. Lovely, lovely, lovely water. Let me start another timer. Siri. 30-minute timer, please.
30 minutes, counting down.
My Siri has an Irish accent. 30 minutes, counting down. Anyway, this is haiku number 3, In the Moonlight by Yossa Buson. It goes like this. In pale moonlight, the wisteria's scent comes from far away. In pale moonlight, the wisteria's scent comes from far away. Very much a sort of traditional Japanese one. In pale moonlight, I think that's pretty clear. You know what moonlight is. Pale moonlight, which means it's not very strong, not very bright. The wisteria's scent. Wisteria is a kind of plant. It's a creeping plant, a plant that creeps and climbs up walls. And in the springtime, when the blossom of wisteria blooms, it is beautiful. Beautiful kind of pink or sort of purple coloured flowers that hang down. It's common to have wisteria growing over a doorway or maybe in a garden, in a place where it can climb. And when the flowers bloom, it looks absolutely wonderful. And it's quite common in Japan, and certainly around Mount Fuji. There's a lot of wisteria there. And in fact, in Japanese, the word for wisteria is the word Fuji. So Fuji is a Japanese word, not just for the mountain, but for a plant, this particular plant, which grows in that area, which is why... Is it that the mountain is named after the plant, or the plant is named after the mountain? I can't remember, but anyway, in English we call it wisteria. In pale moonlight, the wisteria's scent means the smell of the wisteria, but scent is a bit more like perfume or fragrance. It's a slightly nicer sounding word than smell, because smell can be a bad thing, right? Oh, what's that smell? But scent is normally something a bit more pleasant, I would say. Something natural as well. The wisteria's scent comes from far away. On the face of it, this is just pretty kind of descriptive, right? That at night, the writer can smell the scent of this flower at night, and it comes from far away. Now, we can read more into this, and I invite you to do that. I invite you, with these little poems, to let your imagination get carried away and try not to just think, well, doesn't really mean much, does it? It's just like, at night, I can smell flowers. You could take that approach, but let's say, for the sake of all that is beautiful in the world, that there's normally a bit more of a deeper interpretation that could be made from these. And that is the enjoyment of this kind of thing, of poetry and art, is allowing yourself to, in a sense, become part of the artistic process, and to let your imagination run wild, and be open to different interpretations, and be open to different beautiful, emotional, aesthetic responses and feelings. So this is what the blog article said about that. So with this one, Buson invites the reader to share in his nostalgia with elements from nature such as pale moonlight and the wisteria's scent, triggering our visual and olfactory senses, that's senses of smell. The fact that the scent is coming from far away adds a transportive element to the poem, asking us to imagine the unseen beauty of this tree. So just a thought that occurred to me is that this is the sort of thing that comes to you if you leave your phone alone and just sit for a while and drink in the atmosphere of what is going on around you. So instead of just sitting in on a spring evening sitting in on your phone, if you just choose to perhaps sit outside just for half an hour without any other stimulus and just absorb the atmosphere, then you might suddenly have a beautiful experience as you are aware that there is a faint smell of a beautiful flower in the distance, and it's from far away. That's the sort of thing that can come to you if you give yourself a chance. You can find peace and inspiration from stillness. You might notice things or have realizations if you stop the endless stimulation of your device and give your mind and senses a chance to reset. This, according to the writer of the blog article, this is nostalgia. The wisteria's scent comes from far away. Maybe this is at night, when the world is different and things seem to be more internal. It's like the world of the internal world becomes a bit more heightened at night. The world around us becomes more of a space for nostalgia or feelings, and the sense that the smell of these beautiful flowers is coming from far away might be something to do with like the way that old memories come back to you in quiet moments at night. There's a lot of that kind of thing in haiku, I think. Number 4 is this. It's called The Earth Shakes by Steve Sanfield. The earth shakes just enough to remind us. The earth shakes just enough to remind us. The earth shakes. So, of course, we think of earthquakes, right? Those moments when the earth genuinely shakes, which can be a terrifying moment. But the earth shakes just enough to remind us. Well, to remind us of what? To remind us of what? I suppose to remind us that, well, our place in the world is not always guaranteed or secure, that we live on this earth, but we are subject to greater forces, that all of this could be lost. All of this could be lost like that. And so it reminds us of how things are temporary. All of this is temporary. The article says, penned in English, poet Steve Sanfield's only haiku is a quiet reminder of our mortality, inviting us to consider what may be important to us before it's too late. It's always worth remembering that this is temporary. So stop and think about what's important. Take stock of what is important to you before it's too late. People, loved ones, what's basically important, again, not just stuck scrolling through your phone, but making connections with people that you love. What's the thing that you wanted to say to that person that you didn't say? Maybe now's the time to do it. I have experienced earthquakes. They can be frightening, of course, but they're also little and sometimes big, of course, reminders that all of this is temporary and we have to appreciate the moment and the things we have right now, and that we should probably keep some bottles of water and biscuits and a first aid kit under the kitchen table just in case, if you live in an earthquake zone. I mean, I did when I was in Japan. I've got earthquake stories, but those are other stories for another time. Haiku number 5 is called The Taste of Rain by Jack Kerouac. Yes, the American writer, the guy who wrote On the Road. Jack Kerouac also wrote some haiku. This one is called The Taste of Rain. The taste of rain. Why kneel? The taste of rain. Why kneel? I need to explain that. I think you understand the taste of rain, but why kneel? That's kneel spelt Kneel. That's not Neil as in someone's name, Neil Cassidy, Neil Diamond. That's Kneel, which is pronounced kneel. And this is when you get down on your knees. Right now, why would you get down on your knees? You kneel down, well, I suppose to propose to someone, to ask them to marry you. I don't think this is what Kerouac is talking about. It's not talking about marriage proposals. But also we get down on our knees to pray, don't we? To pray to God. In church, you kneel down to pray. The taste of rain. Why kneel? Yep, the iconoclastic author behind On the Road also wrote haikus. As one of the Beat Generation's leading figures, he was part of a movement that produced some of the 20th century's influential poems. This one is so simple, but what is he saying? The taste of rain. Why kneel? Have you ever tasted rain? Of course you have. Of course you have. As someone starts drilling in the building here. I hope that's not going to bother us too much. So this particular haiku signifies finding profound spiritual experience and beauty, not in formal religious settings, but in simple everyday moments, suggesting that stillness and wonder are universally accessible through direct sensory experience, reflecting his Beat Generation ethos of spontaneous, unmediated living. Beat Generation, do you know what that refers to? The Beat Generation, it was a generation of writers, mostly in America, the United States of America, during the 1950s and maybe the 1960s. It was a form of a movement in writing and poetry, which kind of informed the sort of the hippie movement, let's say, or the civil rights movement, the underground alternative movement in culture that incorporated, all those things that we associated with that time, like the music, the Woodstock Music Festival, the alternative way of life of those sorts of people. So this haiku challenges conventional ideas of spirituality, proposing that the divine or meaningful can be found in the ordinary, like the simple sensation of rain on one's tongue, and that kneeling in church is not the only way to have a profound spiritual experience. Again, if you're open to it, when it rains, taste the rain. It can be a divine. Maybe this is in a way how to be close to God. That you are never closer to God in a way than when you're getting rained on and you open your mouth and you taste the rain on your tongue. Is that just pretentious nonsense, or is there something to it? Haiku number 6 is called Haiku for You by Sonia Sanchez, and it goes like this. Love between us is speech and breath. Loving you is a long river running. Love between us is speech and breath. Loving you is a long river running. So this is obviously romantic and intimate. The comment for this is this. Haiku for you acts as a warm, comforting hug. The poet draws similarities between the nature of their love and that of speech and breath, natural and unforced. If someone whispered this to you, wouldn't you feel love too? Love between us is speech and breath. Anyone who's been in love and who's been in a relationship and had those intimate moments, that often that is when you feel love most intimately, is when you are close together with your partner and they're speaking to you, maybe in bed, lying in bed together. It's the speaking on the pillow and the breath, which is kind of one and the same thing in a sense. Speech and breath, they are kind of combined, aren't they? Love between us is speech and breath, that the love is contained within those moments. Loving you is a long river running. Again, a sort of connection to the natural world, a long river running. It's rather beautiful, really. Number 7, oh snail, oh snail. In English, we put "oh" at the beginning of something, as if we are calling out to that thing, right? So if you call out to a snail, if you see a snail, you might say, "Oh, snail," right? So it's slightly old-fashioned English to put O like that as a way of calling out to a thing. But you might have noticed that maybe if you've ever read literature or poetry in English, you might have heard or seen O, just the letter O. And it's as if someone is calling out to something. In this case, it's a snail. So this is O Snail by Kobayashi Isa. O snail, climb Mount Fuji, but slowly, slowly. O snail, climb Mount Fuji, but slowly, slowly. So Isa was renowned for shining a spotlight on smaller, less than glamorous creatures like grasshoppers, bugs and sparrows. In O Snail, he gently reminds the determined snail that while there are important things to do in life, like climbing mountains, there's more to life than speed. The mountain isn't going to go anywhere, is it? So, climb Mount Fuji, but take your time. Do it slowly. There's no rush. And again, I mean, relating this to learning English, can we relate this to learning English in some way? That yes, try, be ambitious. Try to reach a high level, but take your time. Slow and steady wins the race. There's no rush. It's about the journey, not the destination. Take your time. Everything happens. All good things come to those who wait. Take your time. You'll get there. There's no need to rush. You'll get to the top of the mountain eventually. Number 8, haiku number 8 is January by Paul Holmes. And it sounds like this. Delightful display. Snowdrops bow their pure white heads to the sun's glory. Delightful display. Snowdrops bow their pure white heads to the sun's glory. Delightful display. So if a display is something you see, something that's shown to you, if a display is delightful, then obviously it's wonderful. It brings you delight. It's a wonderful thing to see. Snowdrops, these are plants, these are flowers, little wild flowers. They're very common in England. I wonder if you get them where you are. They're often the first wild flowers to bloom, to come out in winter. And it's always a wonderful thing to see when you've been living through the dark, cold months of winter. When, of course, everything's dead. All the leaves have fallen off the trees and there are no flowers and stuff like that. And then maybe one late January morning, you will start to see snowdrops coming up. These little white flowers that just arrive first before most other flowers. These are called snowdrops, and they're beautiful. The flowers are they look a bit like bells that hang down. They're white and they sort of hang down as if they look like their heads which are bowing to something. Bowing is to bring your head down to maybe show respect to something or someone. You might bow to your master or something like that. In this case, these snowdrops are bowing their heads. Their heads are hanging down as if they are paying tribute to the glory of the sun, bowing as the sun shines upon them. I mean, this really, for me, is just something about the delightful feeling that you get when you see these little flowers coming out in winter sunshine. And it just gives you a little feeling of hope. It gives you a little sense that winter is on the way out. The sun will return. Life is coming back. This haiku is part of a Paul Holmes A Year in Haiku poem, where he attempts to capture the essence of each month of the year. Holmes does so fittingly, using vivid imagery to depict the seamless changing of the seasons as the snowdrops bow their white heads to make way for the sun's glory. Do you have snowdrops where you live? How does it make you feel when you see them? Do you notice them? Number 9 is called Snow Melt. It's a similar thing, really. Snow Melt by Penny Harter goes like this. Snow melt on the banks of the torrent, small flowers. Snow melt on the banks of the torrent, small flowers. on the banks of the torrent. This refers to a river being on the banks of the river. A torrent is a river that's running with a lot of water in it, running fast with a lot of water. That's a torrent. Okay. Now, snow melt. This is obviously when the snow melts. And again, this is a reference to the end of winter, or when all the ice and snow is melting. And so a river or a stream would be in a torrent because all the snow is melting and all the water is running down in the stream or river. And so you get a torrent of water going down, and on the banks of this stream or river, small flowers. By placing the river's powerful torrent next to a delicate flower, Harter captures how all of nature's diverse elements coexist beautifully. While the torrent certainly paints a more aggressive image than most haiku, it's balanced by the idea of the snow melting and the delicacy of the flowers emerging from spring. So it's quite, I guess, one of the pleasing things about something like this is the juxtaposition of that fairly aggressive image of the torrent of water, a fast running stream of water, and the melting snow and the appearance of these small delicate flowers. Haiku number 10 is called Meteor Shower. A meteor is a piece of rock, probably flying through space that enters the Earth's atmosphere. So it's like probably a piece of rock. Can they be made of metal? That flies into the Earth's atmosphere, and it burns as it flies through. I guess these are shooting stars, right? Commonly referred to as shooting stars. If you look up at the night sky on a clear night and you look up at the stars, you might see a little line appearing in the sky. And sometimes you get meteor showers, which is where lots of meteors all arrive at around about the same time, and it can be one of the most wonderful things to see. I'm reminded of like summer holidays with my family, and we would be in some nice place without a lot of light pollution, just somewhere out in the countryside, clear nights and beautiful stars, and we would sit out and look and watch meteors arriving, shooting stars. So this is Meteor Shower by Michael Dillon Welch. Meteor shower. A gentle wave wets our sandals. Meteor shower. A gentle wave wets our sandals. So, meteor shower, you know what that is. A gentle wave. Now, is this the wave of water? Is this a wave of the sea? The water coming in? Like you get at the beach? Those sorts of waves. Or is it something waving, like the way a person waves their hand to say hello? I think because of the third line, it's wets our sandals, sort of contextualizes that wave as being made of water. So rather than, let's say, the universe waving in the form of, rather than the universe waving at you in the form of this meteor shower, it's referring to the fact that the writer, and whoever the writer is with, is standing or maybe sitting on the beach with their feet in the water, observing this meteor shower. So that's a beautiful, quite vivid image of being on a beach somewhere with the waves lapping at your feet and the stars above you and meteors flying across. So another non-traditional haiku that eschews the 575. So to eschew something is to kind of like do away with it or not follow, right? Not follow a rule or a sort of tradition or a custom. So this doesn't follow the 575 sort of tradition. It eschews that. Eschew, ESCHEW, Welch's entry here is a snapshot of a rare moment shared between the speaker and someone else. The order of the three images creates a sense of the poet lowering their eyes from shooting stars in the sky before settling on a strangely intimate image of sitting or standing on the beach. With all the wonders of the universe, nothing compares to a moment shared with someone close to you. And I do like the sense of the wonders of the universe arriving at you in both your eyes, and also in the sense of touch as the waves lap against your feet. These are the forces of the universe sort of doing their thing, right? That the waves of the ocean, how can I put this? You think of the tides, the way the moon affects the tides of the water, the way waves are affected by these big cosmic forces, even just wind or air pressure or something, gravity and things like that. I don't know, it's just a beautiful image. Number 11 is After Killing a Spider by Masaoka Shiki. After killing a spider. After killing a spider. Or maybe I should leave a pause. After killing a spider. How lonely I feel in the cold of night. After killing a spider. How lonely I feel in the cold of night. So Masaoka Shiki's After Killing a Spider is a prime example, according to the writer of that blog article, of Haiku's ability to capture the minutiae of life, meaning the minute details. Filled with loneliness and regret, After Killing a Spider depicts exactly what it says on the tin, but then it goes further into the speaker's emotions after the incident, because after killing his only companion, the speaker is left alone in the cold of the night. What's also interesting is that the first break comes after the word killing, emphasizing the brutality the speaker felt on performing the act, even if it was just a spider. After killing a spider, how lonely I feel in the cold of night. I like this because, I don't know about you, but if you ever kill a spider, do you feel bad afterwards? I sort of do. I don't know if I always feel that bad, depends. But there are times when perhaps you quickly kill a spider and then instantly feel a sense of regret. A sort of loneliness, like I don't know, maybe the universe at that point is kind of, maybe that's karma, something to do with karma. There are people in the world, there are spiritual beliefs out there that say that all life is sacred and that even killing a spider is bad karma. I don't know what you think about that. Maybe you're just like, kill them all. I don't know. Any spider who comes anywhere near my house deserves instant death. I don't know how you feel about these things. Number 12, haiku number 12 is called I Kill an Ant. So still on the theme of killing insects or killing creepy crawlies. I Kill an Ant by Kato Shuson goes like this. I kill an ant and realize my 3 children have been watching. I kill an ant and realize my 3 children have been watching. So that tells a little story that the writer kills an ant, which should be a fairly trivial detail, a fairly harmless act. If you see maybe an ant on your table and you kill it, it's a small thing, isn't it? But then you look up and you realise that your 3 little children have watched you commit this killing. It's the nature of haiku is that they focus on little details and then broaden these little things out into the most meaningful and profound things. That's kind of what we're doing here, looking at tiny details and expanding them out so that they become much more profound. So I don't know. How would you feel about that? If you haven't had your fill of bug-killing action, here's a haiku from Kato Shuson. As with after killing a spider, the speaker doesn't feel remorse at having ended a life, but perhaps regrets allowing their kids to see their savage tendencies. Though short in length, this haiku imparts a powerful message. Be the person that you want your children to see. It is something about parenthood as well, that sometimes it's unavoidable. Your children will see sides of you that you don't really want them to see, or they will observe you doing something that you later realise was not great. Maybe killing an ant is not that bad compared to some things. But again, we're talking about the minutiae of life. Number 13 is called Over the Wintry by Natsume Sosei. And it goes like this. Over the wintry forest, winds howl in rage, with no leaves to blow. Over the wintry forest, winds howl in rage, with no leaves to blow. More water, please, already. I'm going to repeat that because I'm just going to keep on glugging this mineral water. Over the wintry forest. So wintry would be the adjective for the word winter, right? So a wintry forest would be a forest in winter time, which obviously you can imagine is like a forest with no leaves on the trees. It's cold, it's bleak, it's desolate, it's freezing, and windy. Over the wintry forest, winds howl in rage. So winds howl, we've had before, is a word that we use to describe wind, the sound that wind makes, like this. But it's also what animals do, like wolves. Ow! Wolves howl as well, and howl in rage. It's to make an angry noise. Winds howl in rage with no leaves to blow. So the winds are raging, they're angry, there are no leaves to blow. So there's no how can I describe this? No leaves to blow. So it's almost like a pointless kind of anger, an anger which has no form of expression, an anger which has no impact. It's a sort of empty, redundant kind of anger of the wind, the winter wind, which has nothing to blow, nothing to throw around in the air. At least in autumn, when the leaves have fallen, the wind gets to play with these leaves or throw them around or whatever. But in winter, there's nothing. It's just an empty, bleak form of rage. Now, it's not just about weather. Obviously, it's symbolic, like all of these haiku. Let's read from the blog post about this while someone drills outside my window. It's hard to be zen, isn't it, in these conditions with this person drilling. I do apologise. Anyway, let's read from the blog post about that. So one can easily imagine the person represented by the metaphorical wind in this haiku, someone in their winter years, meaning someone older, who has spent their time railing against the world. So someone who is older, who's spent time being angry against the world, railing against the world, being against everything in the world, taking the opposite position, being opposed to everything else in the world. Railing against the world, I suppose, just means, I always think railing against the world. How do I explain the phrase railing against something? I mean, it just basically means being in opposition to something, right? And probably being quite angry or opposed to things. So someone older who's spent their time railing against the world only to be left with no one left to listen. While spring often represents the idea of hope in poetry, winter surely is the season of regret. So is this the story of someone who's been very angry and who's fought against the world, always been fighting against the world, and now they're old, there's no one around anymore, and their anger has no audience. It's a sort of a sad story, a winter story. Number 14, The Lamp Wants Out by Natsume Soseki. The lamp wants out. Cool stars enter the window frame. The lamp wants out. Cool stars enter the window frame. So this describes just a little image of maybe sitting next to a window, sitting indoors in a room. The room is lit by a lamp, maybe an old gas lamp or kerosene lamp or something. And when you blow it out, the light of the lamp goes away. And then in the window frame, cool stars enter. So the light of the stars in the sky is able to be visible through the window frame. Okay, that's the image. Now this is a classic by Natsume Soseki, a widely respected novelist and haiku writer. You might read it literally, thinking that one can marvel at the night sky in all of its wonder as soon as the light of the lamp on the street, a street lamp, goes out. Or you can also interpret the lamp as an active mind. Only when we manage to quiet it can we access a deeper, wiser source of light represented by the stars. So again, a bit like the frog jumping into the water and the water then reverting to its clear state again. This maybe is something about the nature of consciousness, that when we switch off the lamp, the light of the stars emerges. We switch off our active conscious mind, then a deeper source of light, the light of the stars, comes to us. Number 15, haiku number 15 is called The Snow of Yesterday by Gozan. And I'm going to drink some water. The snow of yesterday that fell like cherry blossoms is water once again. The snow of yesterday that fell like cherry blossoms is water once again. Okay, cherry blossoms are a common image in haiku. Obviously, I mean, if you know, cherry blossoms in Japan are a big thing. These beautiful, delicate pink flowers, blossoms that come out on the branches of cherry trees. Very delicate, pink. They come out and then within a few days, they're gone. So very, very temporary. The snow of yesterday that fell like cherry blossoms is water once again. As you might have noticed, the art of writing haiku demands an almost superhuman level of observation. Aida Bonosuke, also known as Gozan, speaks about the impermanence. That's how things are not permanent. Things are temporary. The impermanence of our surroundings by noticing how snowflakes turn into water in very little time. This theme of the ephemeral nature of life, the fact that it doesn't last, right? It's impermanent and ephemeral. It doesn't last. It's temporary, not permanent. The ephemeral nature of life is emphasized by the cherry blossoms, which only last for about a week after peak bloom. So again, another meditation on the impermanence or the ephemeral nature of life itself, which is probably something we should always keep in mind for the reasons I gave earlier. Haiku number 16, First Autumn Morning. We've had this one already. Here it is again. First Autumn Morning by Murakami Kijo. First autumn morning, the mirror I stare into shows my father's face. First autumn morning, the mirror I stare into shows my father's face. What does that say to you? First autumn morning, so, the beginning of autumn. And obviously autumn carries all sorts of connotations, doesn't it? The end of summer, it's like the time of decay. Think winter is coming, right? And at the beginning of autumn, you do I mean, you must have felt it, like that sense that the season has turned, things have turned, and you get that smell in the air, the slight smell of decay in the air, a slight sense of coldness in the air. First autumn morning, the mirror I stare into. So he stares into the mirror, maybe in the bathroom. He wakes up in the morning, stares into the mirror, and what he sees is his father's face. So I guess this is about aging, right? When you one day realise that you start to look like your father, or you're growing older like your father, you notice your face seems older. For a moment, you think to yourself, that's me. I don't know if that ever happens consciously, where you don't recognise your own reflection. Unlikely. But sometimes you might just see something, you might catch something in your reflection that makes you think of something else. You suddenly see your father in your reflection, and what does that make you feel? It can make you feel all sorts of different things. But it can certainly make you aware of your aging, aware of what you've inherited from your parents, from your father. Born in Tokyo in 1865, Murakami Kijo helped with the founding of Hototogisu, a literary magazine responsible for popularizing the modern haiku in Japan. In this particular piece, Kijo uses the simple act of looking into the mirror to convey one's struggle with mortality. Context is everything, right? Of course. So, depending on your relationship with your father, or whether your father is still alive or not, seeing your father's face in your own reflection is going to bring different feelings to you. Number 17 is called Just Friends by Alexis Rotella. It goes like this. Just friends. He watches my gauze dress blowing on the line. Just friends. He watches my gauze dress blowing on the line. So I like this a lot because it paints a picture with a little story. Alexis is actually, this is a girl, this is a female writer, as far as I'm aware. He watches my gauze dress. So just friends. So it's talking about two people. They're apparently just friends. Do you know anyone who's got a relationship like that, where it's like maybe a boy and a girl, and they spend time together quite a lot? They seem to be quite close, and you say, are you guys, no, we're just friends. We're just good friends. Right, okay. Just good friends. So describing a moment in a relationship between these two people who are apparently just friends, but he watches my gauze dress. Now, without hearing the third line, you can imagine that maybe he is watching this woman's dress while she's wearing it, and that has obviously some quite sexual connotations, right? There's something sensual about that, something erotic, that this guy is, although apparently they're just friends, she notices him watching her dress. And a gauze dress is a kind of dress that is a material that's slightly transparent. You can see through it. You can see through gauze. So you can see the maybe outlines of the body on the inside. So he's watching her dress. Is he watching her dress as she's wearing it? Is there something voyeuristic about this? Is there something sexual going on? But he watches her gauze dress blowing on the line. So the dress is on the washing line, blowing in the wind, which I think still has that, potentially has that erotic sense, that he's watching this dress and thinking about her body, which is absent from the dress. There's a sense of emptiness as well, which makes us think of the fact that maybe there's an unrequited element in this relationship. But it's really good. Just friends. He watches my gauze dress blowing on the line. A gauze dress, as I've said, is a lightweight, breathable garment made from gauze fabric, characterized by its soft, airy texture, loose weave and comfortable feel. If it's single layered, it can be transparent or see-through. So, according to the writer of the blog article, contemporary poet Alexis Rotella knows how to tap into common human experiences, like for instance, a friendship that gets in the way of love. In an instant, we can feel the frustration for a potential that won't be expressed, meaning that he won't express his true feelings. She notices him perhaps longingly watching her dress on the line, but she knows that he's not really going to say his true feelings, or the true feelings are not being expressed, and also a desire that's not going to be satisfied. So they're just friends, and so he won't express his desire for her for whatever reason, but she sees it and feels it in the way he watches the dress on the line moving in the wind, and there must be other sexual tension too. There's a lot in there. So number 18 is called Losing Its Name by John Sandbach. Losing Its Name by John Sandbach. It goes like this. Losing its name, a river enters the sea. Losing its name, a river enters the sea. So as the river gives up its very identity to contribute to the sea, it reminds us of the importance of selflessness. After all, no man is an island, and we are all parts of a bigger whole, aren't we? So, I mean, this could say anything to you, really, but it's just a meditation on the fact that when a river finally reaches its destination and joins the sea, the river basically dies. That's where the river loses its name, which is quite a sort of a profound thing to think of. But the river is always aiming to reach the sea, and when it does there, that's the end of the river. It loses its name, it dies, and it becomes part of something bigger. I've written on the PDF here a reminder to drink some water. And I have a question, which is, when does water cease to be water? Does water stop being water when you drink it? Or does it continue? A meditation on water. When does water cease to be water? When you drink it? Well, here's the answer. Most water molecules leave your body exactly as they entered, as H2O, via urine, sweat or breath. Right? I was just wondering if when you drink water, does the water stop being water, or does it continue to be water in some way? What happens when we drink? What happens to the water when we drink it? Well, most of it leaves the body in the same form that it entered. It leaves via urine, sweat or breath. Only a small percentage ceases to be water by being chemically dismantled to help your body harvest energy or repair tissues. So unlike a river which dies when it enters the sea, most water molecules survive being drunk by a human and live to tell the tale, perhaps making their way into a river, getting a name, and then losing it when they eventually join the ocean where it probably started anyway. At this point, I'd like to go back to the email from Helen in Quebec, Canada, which inspired me to do this whole episode in the first place. And I realise now, 1 hour and 20 plus minutes into the episode, that this is going to be potentially a long one. So I hope that's all right with you. I mean, obviously, you can do whatever you want, can't you? You're free to take as much or as little as this episode as you like. And you can stick with me if you like more of this. If you want more of this kind of thing, just stick around. It's up to you, but I hope that you do stay for the duration of this episode, however long this may be. I'm willing to just let this take as long as it takes today, right? Because, you know, like the snail climbing Mount Fuji, we're going to take our time. There's no need to rush. So back to the email from Helen in Quebec, Canada, which inspired me to do this episode in the first place. Helen wrote about haiku very passionately, explaining that she has been a haiku writer since 2005, I'm assuming in French, with 5 published collections, and she has helped people translate their haikus from English to French. Getting in touch with fellow haiku enthusiasts in English helped to boost her confidence, and then she attended a haiku awards ceremony in New York City at the UN International School, where she left copies of her haiku book for French teachers. As a result of that, she was contacted by a French teacher in Manhattan about assisting in some haiku workshops, helping to run some haiku workshops, and this idea really boosted her motivation to improve her spoken English, presumably in order to take part in the workshops more effectively, and also to make the most of her time in New York, where the work was to be done. So this is a listener, everyone, right? This is a listener who has found a great source of inspiration for learning English through the world of haiku poetry and the social scene around it, both in French and in English. And this reminds me that there are many inroads into your world of English, into the world of English, many ways, many roads in. And exploring your passions and hobbies can take you into situations in which you have to use English. So what is my point here? Well, I suppose Helen's case is an example of how a narrow focus can be a great way into a wider world of English. Starting with one specific interest and exploring it deeply in English often opens the door to broader English language exposure. Sometimes English just grows sideways as a result of following a thing that you love. And if I can add an additional point here, that I always want to encourage that. And I always want to try to explore different diverse topics and things, like an episode such as this, in order to perhaps sow the seeds of that sort of thing in you, some inspiration that perhaps you can follow, which will lead you into a wider world of English. Anyway, Helen went on to say how she met Japanese translator Hiroaki Sato and American haiku poet John Stevenson in New York City. I hadn't heard of John Stevenson before, but Helen raved about his writing and gave me some examples. She thought this might be a good topic for the podcast, and so here we are. Now, so then, here are some amazingly simple haikus by John Stevenson, which were shared with me by Helen. We'll start with ones from a book called My Red, Selected Haikus by John Stevenson, published by Brooks Books in Illinois in 2021. So I really like these ones. I think they're my favourites, actually. Out of all the haikus in this episode, I find them well observed, quite poignant, without being overly pretentious, and they are humorous in some cases. Obviously, when dealing with poetry, there's always that possibility that poems are going to be pretentious, right? Which is sort of an annoying thing, where maybe there's a sense that something that's not really that meaningful is being presented as being the most wonderful and meaningful thing in the world. I tend to prefer art that is a bit less that's less pretentious, art that's a bit more apparently ordinary. And that's what I like about these ones from John Stevenson. So let's continue with some more haiku. Number 19, checking the driver as I pass a car just like mine. Checking the driver as I pass a car just like mine. If you can write a haiku, listeners, about listening to a podcast with the sound of someone doing work in the background, you will win a special prize in this episode. I do apologise for the sounds of just guys doing noisy things in my building. If you can hear them, maybe you can't hear them. Maybe my podcasting setup is good enough to isolate my voice and not pick up those background noises. But anyway, checking the driver as I pass a car just like mine. I wonder if these work as well when they're read out. There's something about reading them and discovering the lines and reading and converting the written word into, like the way that reading a book can be immensely pleasurable, and it's not the same thing when the book is read out to you. But anyway, I like this a lot. Checking the driver as I pass a car just like mine. I feel like this is something that we do. I mean, something I do if I'm driving and I'm driving a particular car, and then I see another person driving the exact same car. I will suddenly take an interest, and I might have a look at the driver as I pass the car as if I'm curious about who is this other person, this sort of person who's leading a similar life to me, this person who's kind of, in effect, having exactly the same experience randomly. They're in the same seat, holding the same wheel, with the same controls in front of them. And maybe we've got more things in common, or not. I just want to know. For that, in that brief moment, we suddenly are united in ways that I'm not united with anyone else. I'm on that road sharing a very similar experience with that other person, and suddenly I feel a sort of curiosity or maybe kinship with a stranger just for a moment. Is it just me? Number 20, Home for Christmas. Home for Christmas, the toaster I grew up with. Home for Christmas, the toaster I grew up with. This for me captures a certain feeling of when you return to your parents' home, the home where you grew up, the home where you were a child and you grew and became an adult, the place where you grew up, where you spent your childhood, and you return to that home for Christmas, for a family get-together, and you see things there. You see something. Maybe it's just you stand in the kitchen to make yourself a cup of tea, and there is that toaster. They're still using the same toaster. And suddenly you are taken right back to when you were a child or a teenager, and suddenly you are aware of the passing of time, and suddenly you're brought back to some nostalgic moment, which brings everything rushing back to you. You're suddenly 12 years old again at breakfast time, and your mum is making toast, and pop, the toast comes out of that toaster, and then here you are again, much older now, and it's the same toaster. It's hard to describe or put into words that feeling, that very specific feeling that you experience in a moment like that. But I think you know what I mean, right? Have you felt like that? Have you felt that moment, that rush of uncanny nostalgia when you suddenly see something that was so familiar to you in the past, and then here it is again, and just for an instant you're brought you fly back in time emotionally. Number 21. On the subway, a woman with sheet music moving her lips. On the subway, a woman with sheet music moving her lips. This is something about people watching when you might be on the subway, on the underground, on the metro. You might sit there and do a little bit of people watching, and you see some interesting things. You get interesting glimpses into other people's lives. And in this case, John has noticed a woman with sheet music. That's, music notation written out on paper, and she's moving her lips. So she appears to be, I guess, reading the music, practicing. Maybe she's a singer. Maybe she's on her way to music school or a concert or a conservatoire or something like that, and she's practicing reading music and moving her lips. Just an interesting little observation. Number 22. A deep gorge. A deep gorge. Some of the silence is me. A deep gorge. Some of the silence is me. Maybe this is a little more pretentious, but that's up to you to decide. A gorge is like a big canyon, let's say between two mountains or between two large bits of rock or something like that. A gorge would be a deep canyon or valley, narrow valley. Maybe you're standing on a cliff. Maybe you've gone for a walk climbing up some rocks or climbing up some high ground, and you get to the top, and then there's a big gap in the middle, and maybe there's a little river at the bottom of it or something. This is a gorge, so a big, deep, empty space that falls down below you. You stand there at the edge of this gorge, and there just the silence of this empty space. A deep gorge, some of the silence is me. I suppose this is something to do with the experience of when you witness something like that, observe something like that, and a big, huge, empty space. It's hard to come to terms with the space, but it's some of the silence is me. I don't know. I can't put into words that one, but I think we know how that feels. You know, when you let's say you're standing and you see a view of a huge mountain in the distance. It's almost, I don't know. It seems to be a very profound experience, but it's hard to put that into words. But I think he's done it. A deep gorge, some of the silence is me. I mean, that's very efficiently done to capture that feeling. It's just I can't describe it myself. Number 23, complicating my love of music. Complicating my love of music. Her urge to sing. Complicating my love of music. Her urge to sing. So this one is about, I guess, an annoying person. Right? Someone who just always suddenly starts singing, or someone who can't stop themselves from singing, someone who just has to sing, which is great and everything, but sometimes that's not what you want. Sometimes you don't want to be with someone who suddenly starts singing, and like, oh God, here she goes again. And her singing is perhaps not to your taste. And that would complicate your love of music. You know, like you might think, I love music, I'm a music lover, I love listening to music, but this person, the way that they sing and the way that they keep singing, it's making my love, it's complicating my relationship, my loving relationship with music, I'll say that much. So this is quite a dry one, and it is a kind of a humorous complaint about a person and their annoying urge or sudden desire to sing. Number 24, banquet table. Banquet table, just out of reach. The good conversation. Banquet table, just out of reach. The good conversation. So for me, a banquet table is like a large table with food on it, maybe at a cocktail party or a party or something like that. But lots of food has been arranged on a table and it's just out of reach. You can't get it. Why? Because you're in conversation with someone. We've all been in a situation like that where you're kind of involved in a conversation with a person and you keep looking over at the food and you think, oh, I'm so hungry, I want to eat some of that food. But you can't because of the conversation that you're having. Now that could be good or bad. In this case, it's good because it's a good conversation. And so that's what's stopping you from getting the food. You are really involved in this conversation. So I guess that makes me just think of those moments those good moments when you're in a social situation and you're having such a good conversation with someone that you don't end up eating. You end up skipping dinner because you're so caught up in this conversation that you're having with someone. I'll do some more in a few moments. But let's go back to Helen, who wrote this. She said, he's amazing, isn't he? I don't know if you can feel it or how much you know about haiku. Since you lived in Japan for 2 years, maybe you are aware that this form of classic Japanese poetry has spread all over the world now. He is good, John Stevenson. So let's read some more haikus from John Stevenson. I agree with Helen. I think these are great. I like the way he uses and adapts the haiku form to make evocative observations about everyday life, including very specific or intimate feelings which occur in little moments that we probably all experience. There's also humour. At times it feels like observational comedy, which also is the art of pointing out funny little details in everyday life. So let's have some more. Number 25. I'm going to try and speed up a bit. Never touching his own face. Never touching his own face. Tyrannosaurus. Never touching his own face. Tyrannosaurus. I like that one because it's kind of like a joke about Tyrannosaurus Rex, the dinosaur. You know, the most famous dinosaur with the tiny little arms. Such tiny little arms. Huge head, ferocious thing. Huge head, massive teeth. Huge, powerful back legs and a big tail and just tiny little arms. Never touch. And it's a funny observation. They never, ever, never touched their own faces, probably. I don't know. Never touching his own face. Tyrannosaurus. Number 26. Embarrassed by the lavish praise I imagine getting. Embarrassed by the lavish praise I imagine getting. This is good because there's a couple of different interpretations. Lavish praise. So praise is when people praise you, give you praise, right? Praise is good feedback, good comments. It's the opposite of criticism. So praise would be like, that's brilliant. Your writing is fantastic. There's a certain genius in what you do. Your use of language, the efficiency, and your ability to write these haiku, it is astounding. Your work is wonderful. That is lavish praise. So it's not just praise, like good feedback, but it's lavish, meaning it's very, very positive, right? Extremely positive. That's lavish praise. And if you received a lavish praise, you might be embarrassed. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. Thank you. I'm very flattered. That would be if you were embarrassed by lavish praise. But so it's embarrassed by the lavish praise I imagine getting. So this is not actually real praise that someone has given him, but he's imagined getting this praise. So we can think about maybe a moment where the writer is maybe daydreaming and imagining someone giving him lavish praise. Maybe he's imagining going to like a haiku festival and doing a reading, and then in his mind, just for a moment, he daydreams about people telling him how brilliant he is and how brilliant his work is, and then he gets embarrassed. But does he get embarrassed? Is he embarrassed because he's had this fantasy, which is quite an embarrassing fantasy to have, because you realise, am I an egomaniac? I'm sitting here fantasizing about people telling me how brilliant I am. That might be embarrassing. If you catch yourself having those thoughts, you might go, oh God, oh dear, I'm some sort of monster. So is that what he's embarrassed by? Just simply the fact that he's been thinking about this? Or is he embarrassed in the fantasy as well? Maybe in his daydream, people are coming up to him and saying, your poetry is just life-changing. It's absolutely incredible. And he goes, oh, thank you so much. I don't know what to say. That's very kind of you. Maybe this is all part of his fantasy as well, or he's embarrassed that he's having the fantasy. I don't know. How do you read that? Number 27. We had this one earlier. Reversible. No, we didn't have this one earlier. No. We didn't have one about a coat or a jacket, but it's not this one. Anyway, number 27. Reversible jacket, the side I always show. Reversible jacket, the side I always show. So this is about, on the face of it, this is about a reversible jacket. That's a kind of jacket that's reversible, right? It's where you can wear the jacket with this side out, or you can turn it inside out and wear it with the inside facing out, right? It's reversible, Some jackets are like that. You can wear it both ways, inside out or outside in. So reversible jacket, the side I always show. So apparently he's got a reversible jacket, but he always just wears it with one side showing out. It's always that side that shows out. And there's another side, you see, that's inside that people never see, or that he never shows everyone else, although he could show that, but he doesn't. Drilling is happening. There is drilling. Yes. So anyway, maybe we all have that. Maybe we all have a side that we never reveal, even though we could. Maybe we all have a side that we could reveal to the world, even though we don't. Why don't we reveal this other side of ourselves to the world? Number 28. That drilling is really helping, he said sarcastically. Cold moon, a moment of hesitation years ago. Cold moon, a moment of hesitation years ago. I'm not sure I can continue with that noise in the background. I don't know what I'm going to do about this, listeners. I said earlier that we were going to go slow and steady and this would take as long as it needs to take. but I can't continue to do an episode about the peaceful meditative form of poetry called haiku with this in the background. It doesn't really work, does it? Listen to that. Oh dear. I'd love to continue, and I really want to finish this off all in one go, but I think I'm going to have to stop here, to be honest with you, because this is no good. Plus, I'm running out of time. It's not the only reason. I'm also running out of time. So I think I'm going to have to do the unforgivable thing on Luke's English podcast, which is to divide the episode into 2 parts. I think I'm going to have to do that, and I'll have to finish this off at a later date. Maybe I'll just come back to do the rest of this after, because the reason why doing an episode in 2 parts isn't my favourite thing, the reason why that's bad is because one of the things that I think is appealing about my podcast, and one of the strengths of my podcast, one of the things that maybe keeps people listening, is the sense of surprise. Like, you don't quite know what's going to come every week. And this sense of not knowing what the next episode will be or what the next episode will be about, that sense is quite attractive. And I always want to keep that sense alive in my podcast. And when I divide an episode in half, I feel like, since you know what the next episode is going to be, some of the element of surprise is lost. And that's an edge that I like to have. So what I will probably do at this point is stop here, which feels like kind of like trying to stop a train on a journey. But anyway, we're going to stop here, and I will continue and do the rest of the haiku that I've prepared in another episode, which will come at a later date. Okay? All right. Some of you are like, no, please finish the episode. Do the whole thing. Do part 2 next week. Some people will think that. Other people will think, no, it's all right. We want something else next week. I'm the boss. I decide what happens. Okay? Luke's English podcast. It's called Luke's English podcast for a reason, because Luke is the one who makes the decisions. So I'm going to stop here, and probably you'll get something else next week, and I will come back to the subject of haiku in another episode at another time. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm going to leave that one hanging. Cold Moon, a moment of hesitation years ago. Is this about a moment when he looked up at a cold moon on some lonely night, and he's reminded of a moment when he hesitated for some reason years ago? Is it a bad memory? Is it a memory of an opportunity that was lost that never came back? I'll let you give your interpretation of that one, of haiku number 28. You know what? We're only about halfway through my list of haiku here. I've prepared about 60 haiku across the entire episode. So that's another reason why I think maybe now is a good time to stop. So an unexpectedly abrupt end here due to various factors. One of the main ones being all that drilling and stuff. But still, this is where we're going to stop. I would like to invite you again to write in the comments section, what do you think of this episode? What were your thoughts? Which haiku resonated with you in any way? Which ones did you like? Tell us about them, and just generally leave your comments. I'd love to know your thoughts after listening to this, if indeed you do have thoughts. I hope you do. And the challenge, if you are willing to accept it, is to write some kind of haiku and resist the urge to use AI. I mean, I don't mind that much if you do, because to be completely honest with you, I did write some haiku with AI after being inspired by this episode. And for the haiku writers out there and the haiku lovers, that's probably completely forbidden and a terrible, terrible thing to write haiku with AI. And people probably have very strong opinions on that. So anything written by AI is obviously going to have much less value. If you're using ChatGPT to write your haiku, the value of that is going to be much less, of course. But who knows, it's sort of the results speak for themselves. Some things that you write with AI might end up somehow being incredibly profound. But I would encourage you to try to do it without the use of ChatGPT or whatever you choose to use. Try to do it without that. But there's a challenge. Try writing a haiku about your experience of listening to Luke's English podcast. There's a challenge for you. Some of you will accept that challenge, and I look forward to your comments. But you don't have to write a haiku. You can just write any kind of response, including maybe what your favourite haiku was that you heard in this episode. That's it for this. I just wanted to say as well at this point, I hope you enjoyed the last episode, which was episode 973, which was The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb. Premium listeners, did you notice that I've published... I think it's just one premium episode. I'm not sure when I'm going to publish part 2. I've got parts 1 and 2. I've recorded them both. I published part 1. Maybe I publish part 2 at the same time. Not sure what I'm going to do yet. But anyway, check your premium subscription. There's an episode with some vocabulary that I took from the Engineer's Thumb story. And there was a lot of vocab that I highlighted in the story text, over 150 items of vocab. But I picked out just about 30 items of vocab, mainly phrasal verbs and fixed expressions. And I've made a couple of premium episodes about them. So check them out. Check your premium subscription, teacherluke.co.uk/premium, which is where you go to sign into LEP Premium if you are a subscriber. And if you're not a subscriber and you want to sign up, that's also where you go to do that. 2 episodes about vocabulary from the previous episode, The Engineer's Thumb. Learn some phrasal verbs and other natural expressions in context. There's a vocab quiz that I do, which makes it more interactive, and then some rambling as I use discussion questions that I've prepared for the vocabulary. So all of it is there to support you and help you learn vocabulary effectively from the previous episode of the podcast. That's it for this one, though. Another episode with more haiku will arrive at some point. It might not be the next one. It will arrive at some point in the future. That's something to look out for. But otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I will speak to you again soon. But for now, it's just time to say goodbye. Bye, 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 bye.